Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, at least here on the West Coast. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this really interesting and exciting webinar to talk about the sustainable and profitable transition to all-electric refrigerated trailers in California. My name is Nikki O'Kook. I manage the Clean Off-Road Voucher Incentive Program here at CalSTART for the California Air Resources Board. I'm joined today by some amazing colleagues at XL Fleets and also eNow. But I would like to start out with a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to give you a breakdown of our agenda today. So first things first. The audience should use the Q&A function in order to ask questions. The chat function is open, however, it will not be monitored for questions. So feel free to ask questions at any time during our presentation today. Put those into that Q&A and we will address those at the end of our presentations this morning. The other bit of housekeeping is that you are going to receive a recording of this, as well as the presentations that you see today, the resources that I'm going to share. All of that is going to be in your inbox tomorrow morning. So don't worry, every resource that is going to be presented here today will be made available to you after the event. Let's see. So today's programming is going to include a brief discussion by me, just talking about where the state of regulation is here in California, and a little review of the incentive programs that are available for this very important work that we are doing. After that, you will be hearing directly from the folks at eNow regarding their technology and the total cost of ownership and savings potential available there, as well as being joined by XL Fleets. So let's jump in and get started. So the first resource I'm going to share with you, actually my top 3 resources really about this conversation. And it is important to know that the California Air Resources Board has been in a rulemaking process for quite a while regarding both truck-mounted and trailer TRUs. Now, the best resource on where to get information on that rulemaking process is going to be directly at the California Air Resources Board website. So a quick Google search for CARB and TRU will bring you right to the page where you can get up-to-date information on the rulemaking process. And this topic was actually heard by the board just last month. And this presentation that I'm sharing with you now, which again we will share with you at the end of the event, has incredible detail on sort of the state of CARB's thinking regarding TRU transition to zero emissions. So I'm going to only share a few key items within this presentation, but I really do encourage all of you to go ahead and get it and download it and revisit it because it will sort of be guiding the process as we move forward. So really quickly, the most important thing to keep in mind here is that TRUs do make a significant contribution not only to GHG emissions here in California, but also really localized pollutants like PM and NOx. And because of this, there's a big focus on how we can transition to zero emissions in order to cut community health risks, to meet our local and regional air standards goals, yes, to mitigate climate change and reduce GHG emissions, and also to meet the governor's very, very aggressive and ambitious zero emission goals. And the most important one to note here is that the governor's executive order called for all off-road to be 100% zero emission by 2030. And that's not very far away. So let's talk about how we are going to get there. Right now, the current TRU regulation applies only to the truck-mounted TRUs, and that rule is going to come into effect 2023, I believe. You're going to have purchase mandates of 15%. Now, it's important to note that at the time they were considering including trailer-mounted TRUs in this part 1. However, it's been segmented, right? So there's a part 1, which is truck-mounted, and part 2, which is trailer-mounted, and that's going to be coming up. However, the goal of zero emission by 2030 has not moved, right? So the end goal has not moved. However, the rulemaking has been delayed slightly. So in fact, rather, the window for transition is getting shorter. So don't take the fact that the rulemaking for the trailer-mounted TRUs not having been done yet as a sign that it's slowing down or won't be done. In fact, it will only be accelerated. Yes, so beginning at the end of 2023, our truck-mounted TRUs will need to phase in at zero emission at 15% per year. I think that we should all look to this cue as a good sign of the same types of regulations that will happen for trailer-mounted TRUs very, very soon. Now, the other important thing to remember about this is the large investment that the state of California has committed to this transition. But with very important and relevant returns. So close to $1 billion will be spent to incentivize the transition from the current TRU to completely zero emission models. And we expect to see some incredible health benefits from that. However, you know, I do want to make the point here that these incentives are almost always intended to accelerate the market, to bring benefits to early adopters, to start increasing volumes, bringing down component costs, and hopefully eventually achieving some sort of cost parity. However, it should be noted that at least in California, they have a very strict policy of not funding compliance. So once the regulation for TRUs has been put into place, the incentives that are available for that are going to be ratcheted down very quickly. So let's talk a little bit about those incentives. So again, a reminder that this presentation with lots of good information is available at the California Air Resources Board website, and all of their rulemaking dates, processes, presentations, recommendations will all be found there, and we'll be sending that link to you. Now, the second resource that you will also find is all of the different funding types that are available for this transition. First on the list here is the Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project, and that is the CORE program. You can find a link here to it. You can also go directly to the website, which is californiacore.org. On that website, you are going to find that eNow's products are listed in the catalog. They have already gone through the process of having their equipment evaluated by CARB staff, approved, and assigned a voucher incentive level, which is available here. And you can click into any of these to see further specs on the technology and to learn more about the voucher incentives that are available. Now, two important things to remember about CORE that sets it a little bit apart from some of the other funding mechanisms. CORE does not require that you retire any of your diesel units. So this is not a scrap and replace program. This is intended to help fleet owners and fleet managers to grow their fleet, accelerate their commitment to zero emissions, and is also designed to be an incredibly streamlined and easy to use program. We would like to make this as easy as possible on you. So in fact, there is no grant application process. There is not a competitive award. It is simply a dealer, which in this case, you'll be hearing from your partners here who can help you get these voucher requests in. They will be putting in a very short piece of application on your behalf, and then the voucher funding is set aside for your purchase to buy down the incremental cost difference between a diesel unit and a zero emission one. And so those are some of the benefits of the CORE program. It was very quickly oversubscribed last year with a large amount of funding going to the TRU category, and we expect to see the same next year. So next year, we expect to actually have our funding potentially quadrupled. We will be learning more about that at the CARB board hearing next month. But there is going to be a significant amount of resources available, and I really recommend that everyone keep an eye on the CORE website where you can learn when we will be reopening with the expectation that would be in Q2 2 of 2022. Now, let me just spend a little time talking about some of the other resources that are available, right? So because of the interest in really bringing down localized air pollution, especially the types that impact neighborhood health, there are community air protection incentives at the very local level. Statewide, available through every individual air district, you can find either Prop 1B or Carl Moyer funding. Now, these two are grant programs, and they are scrap and replace programs. So if you do have trailer mounted TRUs that you are prepared to retire at this time, this is an excellent program to look at because it actually will cover a significantly more amount of your purchase price. These application processes can be a little bit longer. However, you have, again, some excellent partners joining us today that can guide you through that process. We also have here in California the low carbon fuel standard. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that, but that is going to offset your fuel costs. And I would be remiss not to mention that in the core program, we are still also funding your infrastructure and charging needs. So there are just a variety of programs to help with that. Local utilities, also, you can find a list of the local utilities that have things like the Charge Ready program and other resources to help you get the power you need into your facility to power these units. And then last but not least, at the federal level, there is DARA, the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, and that is done on an annual basis. Again, you can partner with our team here to get applications in for large-scale retirement of diesel units to replace with all zero emission. So those are my updates to you. These are my top 3 resources. The California Air Resource Board has all of their rulemaking available online. Please follow that closely. They have all of the resources for TRU funding available here that will direct you to other places like CORE or your local air district. And then last but not least, always make sure to keep on top of what's happening with CORE. We're going through some rule changes in the next few months here. However, very few of them are related to TRUs. We expect that this category will remain relatively the same as it was last year. So just look forward to that funding becoming available shortly. Now, with that, I would like to turn it over to Jeff with eNow. Jeff Lapp is the CEO of eNow. He has some important information to share with all of us regarding the technology and the cost savings that will be available. Again, if you have questions regarding anything I just said, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll be addressing all of those questions at the end of our discussion today. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Appreciate the introduction. And Nikki, thank you and your colleagues at CalSTART for the great work they're doing in helping us change the environment and so forth. So thank you very much. I'd like to talk about the technology side of our business. We have partnered with XL Fleet. A little background on eNow. We founded the company in 2011. Primarily around designing and developing solar-based auxiliary power systems, specifically for commercial transportation, things like in-cab heating and air conditioning for Class 8 sleeper trucks, lift gates, telematics, etc. And over this period of time, we have installed and sold around 4,500 systems that are currently operating in the U.S. with millions of miles on those particular vehicles. Simultaneously, we've developed the straight truck and trailer refrigeration product where we provide a complete system. We've partnered with XL Fleet, who was founded in 2009. They have 200 plus employees. They went public in December of last year. As you can see, have over 150 fleet miles of history. So the combined entity of the two companies has the technology platform and has the history and performance over a period of time that I think the industry is looking for. The trailer system that we have developed, again, is an all-electric unit. It does replace the current diesel units that operate. To hit on some of Nikki's points on a greenhouse gas emissions, a typical trailer operating approximately 2,500 hours per year will generate around 30 metric tons of CO2, and that's in comparison to approximately 4.6 tons that the average car would generate. So it's quite significant in regard to what it can save. Our systems run anywhere between 10 to 12 hours a day, and this is in applications such as dairy, produce, that are operating in the 32 to 40 degrees, but we're also able to operate at what they refer to as deep frozen, minus 20 degrees. So it's quite a range of performance capabilities. The thing I think that most people, especially in California, will see is that energy costs have risen significantly over the last year. Diesel fuel in California, I think today is roughly $4.70 in comparison to last year, I think at $3.50. So, 36% increase, while electric utility costs have only gone up 9%. And what we're showing is that you can significantly save in the operation of the all-electric system up to about 50% of your current operating costs between fuel and maintenance and warranty costs by going to all-electric and achieving the same benefits and the same route capabilities that you do today with diesel. So with that, I'd like to ask my colleagues at Excel, Phil and Suresh, to step in and talk about the actual return on investment savings calculations that you will see here on the next page. And I look forward to answering your questions at the end.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Thanks to everyone for joining us. The model you see in front of you is really built on the conversations we've had with fleet operators, fleet lessors, et cetera. As anybody on the call in the industry will know, there's a lot of variability. And so you do have to adjust the model to understand exactly how a given solution will work under a given scenario. That said, with the incentives that are available today, we are not finding very many applications where the numbers don't pencil, because the core incentive at $65,000, as you can see on your screen there, and the LCFS credits, which basically every kilowatt hour that you're using to charge the unit instead of using diesel earns you back money. Between the two of them, it really quickly helps to pay back the additional capital cost of going electric. In terms of the, and I think one really big point that I just wanted to highlight that we heard Nikki refer to is that there's very generous incentives right now that are helping companies like ours get down the cost curve. And actually, we see great opportunities for that with getting volume. But in the short run, the state has stepped in to help early adopters get moving. And there's going to be mandates and requirements and regulations soon. And at that point, these are going to go away. So there's a lot of value to going first, actually making and saving money, plus just being prepared for what's coming. As far as what we've put in here in terms of assumptions to make sure people kind of feel comfortable about what these numbers tell us, we're assuming 2,000 hours of annual runtime. We found that to be pretty middle of the road. There's definitely lighter use cases, definitely heavier. Assuming about 0.8 gallons of diesel per hour. We have some real world data confirming that, at least in certain use cases. We assume that with our package offering, the customer's going with a Wabash MSC trailer, which does result in higher efficiency. And that results in an expected hourly draw of about 3.9 kilowatt hours, which is what we've plugged in. You'll see that the lease rate is higher even after the incentive. And so that's sort of one of the reasons why we're approaching this with a lease model to make it so that the net benefit to the customer on an ongoing basis is to save money. Because while you're paying a little bit more in your lease every month, as you can see here, we estimate maintenance costs would be about half, and those estimates are ones that we verified and worked with carrier dealers to ascertain and verify. And in some cases, I'd say we were actually a bit conservative here. Diesel prices, you see we ran this analysis with under $4 diesel, which is no longer the case today, but again, even in this example works. The electricity rate is approximate, but comes from the IEA, so it's on average what an industrial customer is paying. If you're on a commercial rate, it's likely even higher. And what you come out to basically is that before the LCFS credits, your annual cost for the standard diesel situation and lease is about $23,000 versus $21,000, and then the LCFS credits really take you over the hump. And so the last thing I'll say before I turn this over to Suresh is just when you're thinking about the economics here, there's the real drivers of this are first the incentives that take down that capital cost. So it's a good time to do that while the capital cost will come down as we scale. But the other two real drivers here are that it's well known and no different here that when you're using electricity and you're using electric motors and batteries, you're going to have a lot less maintenance costs related to internal combustion. Here, we're just showing you the actual savings from that. But as we all know, having something that breaks down less often has a lot of ancillary benefits that aren't fully captured here. And then the other item here is obviously fuel savings. So ultimately what happens is the more you use this product, the more money you're saving relative to diesel. So Suresh, I'll let you jump in from there.
Hey, thanks, Phil, and thank you, everybody. So look, I think as Phil kind of articulated here, when we think about the relative comparison between the diesel and what we are offering, what we're offering is slightly more expensive on a net basis. But when you compare it apples to apples on the same lease rate at 7%, I think what you're left here with is an annual savings that's 14%, which is quite compelling relative to the diesel TRU. And even if you were to take out LCFS, you're still better off under this approach on an annual basis. And then on a lease cost basis, if you were to look at this over a 10-year time horizon, you're looking at an 18% NPV basis. The only other point I wanted to make is we recognize that customers want to purchase this themselves versus others may want to lease it. So generally speaking, as a product offering, we are able to offer both options so that we can make it easier for the consumer, the customer to purchase one of these, and obviously managing the incentives and things associated with this offering, we can give it to you in one turnkey solution. So Nikki, I think I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So I invite everyone to stay on screen with your videos up and unmuted, and we're going to start taking some questions and having some discussion. So thank you so much. The first item that I would like to ask you guys about is if you could just walk me through infrastructure, charging infrastructure. What does it look like? What are the challenges? What should people be thinking about getting started and preparing for this?
Sure. Jeff, would you like to take it?
Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, great. So I think one of the elements of this partnership between us and eNow is that since going public, XL Fleet has established a division we call XL Grid. And that, along with our electrification as a service offering, the entire view is that essentially as we move from a world of fossil fuel vehicles to one of electric, we can't think of vehicles in isolation. We need to be thinking about the entire system. And so we, with eNow, will essentially make sure that the total cost of ownership, including infrastructure, makes sense to the final user, and will help to enable it. And as far as the specifics in this case, we had, a variety of options for where to go with charging. What we've decided to do with our offering is go with shore charging, so 480 volt, 3-phase, because the industry has already been using that infrastructure for anti-idling and electric standby. So the first movers in that area would be able to use our product plug and play. It also means that for these early units and these pilot units, the relative cost of that initial installation or the initial 5 or 10 installations are going to be less expensive and have a lower power demand. So what we're really looking for is your sort of hub and spoke routes or your regular point-to-point routes, where this will work extremely well, lower the upfront cost, and allow everyone to get comfortable. We do believe that in the medium term, DC charging is going to become the norm, but we don't want the necessity of a major investment in DC charging to become an impediment, especially when a huge proportion of the market just doesn't need it. So that's really why we came with that path. And again, when you come to us, we're not just going to try to sell you a trailer. We're going to make sure that you have a solution that works for you, both on a reliability and operational perspective and a total cost of ownership perspective.
Yeah, such an important point. And XL Lift, working also with on-road trucks, knows that that's actually very not true for the truck market. So if you're a fleet who's looking to reach some sustainability goals or to come in compliance for some regional warehouse rulemaking that's been happening, you'll find that transportation electrification units really are, refrigeration units, really are at like an amazing opportunity to have low upfront infrastructure costs and achieve significant emissions reductions. My second question, sort of following on to that, is for those who are not very aware of the low carbon fuel standard and sort of how LCFS credits work, would you like to give them a quick primer about how their infrastructure and charging is actually going to get them more savings from the state?
Bill, I'll let you hit on that again, since you talked about
Sure.
it in your slides.
Sure, happy to. So LCFS is a little bit confusing because ultimately it's basically converting all of the different energy sources into CO2 and into emissions. And so without going into a lot of detail about that, the reality is it is a little bit complicated to do, but what we've done is integrate the way that our telematics system from the TRU works so that it's automatically ensuring that we're categorizing where different sources of energy are coming from so that they fit right into that system and will allow the benefit to be easily captured. And we can play that role for customers, essentially ensuring that they are getting that payback that they expect. We also can do, there are broker strategies, and I don't want to get too far on this, that you can imply, that you can do things like if you're buying from grid electricity instead of using the power from the roof, you can actually buy RECs from the market to increase the total value of your LCFS credits. And so that's another example of where we're trying to sort of take the risk off the table for the end user.
Great, thank you. So we had a question in the Q&A, which actually had to do with chip shortages, but I would like to address it also just from a general manufacturing capacity question, right? I would start by offering at least this insight from working on these incentive programs, which is that the closer we get to those regulatory compliance deadlines, the faster the orders start flying in, and the further down on the list you will potentially be to receive your unit and get into compliance. So I think that when we're thinking about manufacturing capacity, we should just train ourselves to go ahead and get at the front of that queue so that you're not scrambling when it's time to comply. But I will let Jeff or any other panel member talk a little bit more about what you're expecting to see as far as capacity and then demand that will be driven by upcoming regulations.
Great question, Nikki. And you're right, COVID hitting in 2019, 2020 has wreaked havoc on the transportation industry. Very obvious with regard to cars being sold as well as other components. that are just not in the pipeline. It has affected commercial transportation in regards to components for trailer production, whether that's insulation, whether that's steel, whether that's ABS brake systems, anything to do with the electronic package. So, we're going to be facing the same hurdles that everybody else is facing in just getting, trailers and TRUs to begin with. But, the earlier we get in the queue, it takes less cost to produce an all-electric TRU than it does a TRU with a diesel engine. So if you think about the fact that a diesel engine has to be produced someplace, shipped here to the United States, and installed in these particular units, there is a lot less capital in a 8100 versus an 8500 from Carrier, for example. So from that particular product availability, we're going to have more availability of all the all-electric units than we will on the diesel particular units. But it's still a challenge. It's going to be a challenge across the board, and we're dealing with it very similarly to how other companies are.
If I can speak real quick just to the power electrics component, part of the reason Jeff jumps to the larger framework is that actually the trailers and the TRUs are more the issue. We've basically found that in our supply chain, our lead times are sub 4 months. So we like most good suppliers, plan ahead for our ordering. So at this stage, we are not a bottleneck. We're not a limiting factor. We have some of our own allocations for trailers on order, but that won't apply for everyone, and we're subject to the same sort of laws of physics or laws of supply chain as Jeff was mentioning. But for our offering, the battery, the power electronics, the solar, at this point, we're not a limiting factor.
Yeah, and I'd like to offer some sort of strategic advice to fleets, which is this. So at least for the core program, but for others as well, you want to be putting in your application when the window is open, because the funds become allocated very quickly. After that, after you've put in your voucher request and the funds are set aside for you, or you've been awarded your grant, you very often have a year, but now due to new COVID delays, the programs are offering extensions beyond a year to actually receive, take delivery, make final payment, get your EVSE installed. So you will have a window of opportunity from when you put in your grant or voucher application until when you'll actually take possession of these units. And if that is delayed because of supply, I've seen delays because they couldn't get a truck to get a piece of equipment on out from the East Coast to the West Coast. So all types of delays can be accommodated for. The only delay that cannot be accommodated for is if you delay in requesting the funding. So putting in the voucher request is the most important piece, and then working with all of your good partners here for timeline challenges is something that can be addressed later.
Nikki, can I add something to that? eNow and Excel have people on our staff that help customers going through the process of applying for and obtaining grants. But I also want to point out that we've partnered with CALSTART. So CALSTART's just not a California entity. CALSTART has offices all around the country, and we have partnered with CALSTART to help us on the national level for DERA grants as well as the state level. So I just want to point out that CALSTART's a great resource, not just in the state of California.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's important because of our name to remind folks that we are, in fact, a national and now global nonprofit. So there's a follow-on question to, I think, the point you were just making, Jeff, which is someone is asking about price lists and how you find out about pricing and sort of put together this whole package and financing and all of those things. So any one of our panelists, I see Suresh nodding, so maybe this is for you. Just walking the fleets through how they get started on this process. Oh, you're on mute.
I'll quickly chime in, and Jeff or Phil can add to it. Look, I think it's very important that we look at it on a customer by customer basis, because a lot of this evolves into understanding what the customer is going to use this for. I think I saw something in the chat about, what if it's a distribution facility? I think we need to look at the totality of it, and look at the infrastructure component as well as the TRU component. Jeff, you can touch more on the actual trailer and TRU component, given your experience with that.
Yep. So Nikki, what we do with the customer, when a customer shows interest in the systems, we go through an analysis with the customer with regard to how many hours a day they're operating the equipment, what is their typical route, how many door openings, because a food service company is going to be different than, a point-to-point type of fleet. So we go through that process with the customer, and then based off of where they're located, we come back with an analysis that shows them, here are what your anticipated savings could be. And from there, then we put together a proposal, which includes the monthly payment. Like Suresh had said earlier on, we will sell the equipment, but we've put together our own financing capabilities, and are offering the systems and the equipment on a lease basis. But that's how we come up with the pricing. We work with the customer and look at what their current operation is, and come back to them after.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I would also note that the question about the price list might have confused the CORE website as a price list. So on the californiacore.org website, those numbers listed there are in fact voucher levels. You'll see though that there's several different models, as Jeff mentioned, right, both in trailer size and in battery size. And so really working with this team to find the right fit for you. And then there will be a different price point, but the voucher levels will be the same as advertised on CORE, and therefore impact your total cost of ownership differently. The next question we have here is the eNow TRU only applicable with the Wabash MSC trailer and Carrier 8100 electric, or can you mix and match?
Great question. Let me point out the reason we partnered with Wabash to begin with on the MSC was because of the MSC's better insulation value properties. It conserves about 25 to 30% more energy just because of the molded structural composite technology. However, we can fit our systems on anybody's trailer. We can use other than the Carrier product. Primarily, we use Carrier now because the 8100 is the only all-electric system on the marketplace. We also are able to use Carrier's 85 and 8600 technology, which is the diesel with electric standby. So we do have a plug-in hybrid that's not, does not qualify for the CORE program because, it continues to have a diesel engine as a backup, but we do offer a plug-in hybrid version as well.
Great, thank you. So here's a tough question. In your experience, have you seen any TCOs, any total cost of ownerships against this?
Sure, if I can, sorry, unless you want to, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Phil.
So we've done extensive total cost of ownership analyses, all kinds of different analysis. Now, if specifically you're talking about I see on the quote here about competitors who are using regenerative technologies. One, XL's hybrid and plug-in hybrid solutions are based on regenerative technology, so we know it extremely well. The bigger concern, I think, with respect to those competitive offerings is that in our own analyses, we're not yet comfortable that these are going to stand up as far as incentives in the medium and the long term, and frankly, in meeting regulation, because they need to be generating, they can't essentially be creating a drag on the vehicle to generate the electricity, or you're essentially using the most inefficient possible solution, which is basically dragging on the diesel engine of your tractor. And so we have not ruled it out. We have advanced planning because we have multiple avenues for that. But with our current solution, there's just no question that one, we can save the customer a lot of money. Two, we will definitely be doing it without any use of diesel. It will accomplish the objectives of the state. And so, the other route just didn't have that option. And so while we evaluate how and where it becomes economical, the other solution just doesn't, at this point, we haven't verified it sufficiently to feel comfortable that's the way to go. So it's been less of a total cost of ownership than does it actually get you to zero emissions?
Thanks. So we still have follow-on questions, really digging into the details of those savings. So I don't know if you want to put your slide back up or if you just want to speak to it, but really, what can fleets expect as an annual operating savings and return on investment? That's the question I think everybody always wants to have a quick answer to in their pocket when they have to go and make this argument within their organizations.
So it's absolutely application specific. The way I would think about it is really about runtime hours. So the example that you see here is 2,000 hours of runtime. At 2,000 hours of runtime, we're expecting that annually you'd save about 14%. That can be, the higher that number goes, the greater the annual savings. At the same time, you need to make sure that the application that you're using this is one that sort of fits the technology. And that's something that we help you verify up front. So where is it traveling? What kinds of stops does it typically make, et cetera? And it doesn't have to be one, it can be a variety, but we just kind of look for the worst case scenario and make sure that you have more than enough to use the trailer for your needs. So, if you bump this up to 2,500, your savings go up several percentage points. And that's the way to think about it. If you have a very lightly used trailer, say it was 1,000 hours annually, you would still save money, but it would go down because there's not as much diesel that you're offsetting, and there's not as much maintenance that you're saving money on. So those are really the factors that kind of drive it, and that's sort of the ballpark of savings.
And Nikki, let me also point out that volume, as the volume of the systems picks up. So right now we're in a very low, number of units annually. But as the number of units annually grow, the cost of the technology is going to be reduced significantly. Give you some examples. I mean, lithium-ion battery cost 5 years ago were, over $1,000 a kilowatt hour. Those battery costs have dropped, 70%. And with more production and again, more volume, those battery costs will continue to come down. So you're not only going to see an increase of that 14% that we're estimating today because of volume, but can anyone say whether fuel prices are going to come back down or fuel prices going to continue to go up? So, the cost savings could get more significant than they are today. But this is factoring in today's cost, today's incentive, today's operating costs, et cetera. And the likelihood is all of those are going to go up.
Great, thanks. And I saw another question in the chat going back to infrastructure. So TCO and charging are like always the two things that we have to reiterate multiple times because you have to really internalize it and remember it as you start your planning process. So if one of you would like to just one more time describe to us what type of chargers need to be installed, maybe timeline and cost associated with that again. How is it the same or different maybe than your standard car charging? So
Phil, do you want me to just talk? So what we're not following a car charging standpoint at this point in time. So we're not doing DC fast charging or anything, or level 1 or level 2. As Phil said, what's normally used in the industry today for refrigerated trailers is quite simply a 483 phase type of plug. And with people with a transformer, they can run that down to 208 three-phase. But we're using the same exact infrastructure that is being used today. We do see that in the future, as the straight truck and the Class 8 market takes off, there will be more DC fast charging capabilities at customers' facilities, and that's what they'll have to depend on. And we will move in that direction to start. But to start right now, it's 483 phase. It is actually included in the lease price of a trailer. So we actually include one plug and one charging pedestal for every trailer that we would sell or lease. And in addition to that, we will work with the customer to work with the utility, because in some cases, the utility may be needed to come in and increase the power at that particular site that a customer wants to operate a trailer at.
There's something I'd like to add to that, that I just see one of the questions in the Q&A about what if you have 40 trailers and you have to come in at night and charge, and the issues that creates. So those issues that apply here, that apply to any form of EV, they're very real. They're definitely the kinds of issues to be worried about. And what I would say about them is that, one, the reason why XL Grid exists is to help customers solve those problems. And that means you need to have smart charging so that you're charging in a way that is optimizing your electric bill. You need to be ready and able to add other technologies when and if compatible and needed, solar, energy storage, et cetera. But the other element to this is that there, much like with the incentives, there is a huge first mover advantage. If you are in a park of many warehouses and you want to be the last one to put in charging, you're going to be the one where the electric utility comes to you with a huge bill or says, look, it's just not feasible. And so I hate to kind of describe it this way, but it is a bit of a zero-sum game. There's a certain amount of capacity in any different part of the grid. And so there's huge advantages to getting there early, to making sure that you have capacity. And we definitely in our work come across some of the leading organizations out there with a lot of infrastructure who are starting to make those investments ahead of their need because they see that coming. Now, we're not necessarily advocating to go huge, but it might be a great time to start testing the waters and understanding what is your capability, what is the availability of the power at your site, what would it cost to do upgrades to improve, et cetera. So I think this is just an important component for people to be thinking about. Is it's not something that's static. As more people go electric, the amount of electric load that doesn't cost more to add, diminishes. So.
And another strategic piece of advice there, right? To be one of the first, but also to start conversations with your landlord and your local utility now, and set up a regular cadence of planning. It's an excellent investment for landlords, but it takes a while to arrive at the agreement, decision, investment. So, Suresh, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I was following the Q&A with regards to competitive advantage. And look, I think it's important to point out that part of the Excel strategy, and Jeff kind of talked about it in the lead-in, is we are trying to provide an easier way to acquire this product, recognizing there are multiple variables that we need to solve for. We recognize people need to solve for how to get incentives. We recognize the question around, if there's 40 trailers that need to come into a hub, what is the impact to that building? Excel acquired a company called World Energy that is a building efficiency business. And really the strategy there is to bring in folks like that as we go into the assessment period so that we can try to solve a dynamic problem here and try to do it under one packaged offering. So we can be thoughtful, and this isn't a Band-Aid solution. It's to really think about, how can you operate over a long period of time sustainably? And I think that is an important piece here. that I think people need to do well. And that's what we are putting together as part of that assessment and long-term service offering.
Thank you.
Nikki, I'd like to add one other thing too, is because I see one of the questions about, competitors and barrier to entry. One of the things I'd like to point out is that eNow and Excel aren't reinventing commercial refrigeration technology. What we've done is we have designed and developed and built an energy platform that can eliminate the diesel engine and the fuel tank on a trailer. Our systems, the TRU that a customer selects, can plug right into our system, and that system runs just like if it was plugged into the side of a building. So we haven't reinvented, technology that Thermo King and Carrier have developed over the years that customers are used to, that they buy today, that they get service today. All we're doing is providing a renewable, very, very clean energy source to run these units by that significantly reduces fuel and maintenance cost.
Great, thank you. So we've got a challenging question, which is, how do you think about using these systems in situations when a reefer may be without a plug for an extended period of time, or when there's limited solar availability?
Yeah, if I can speak to this one. So one thing that, as we looked at the challenge of addressing this market is that if you design a product that will work and meet every single possible use case, it will be very expensive, and sort of with every solution you create, you create another problem. And so we haven't created a product that we intend to solve all situations. So I've actually done analysis now for our customers on their usage, and we do identify this case, right? Trailers that sit for days in and days out burning diesel in the yard. The fact is that any fleet operator who identifies this knows that that is actually a huge, huge problem and a money loser. And so one of the advantages that we bring is that because we can package everything, if you can bring an electrical outlet out there, that pays for itself so incredibly quickly. That's one point. The second point is we do, as Jeff mentioned, have an offering that would use diesel backup. So if you want to get those economic benefits, but also have the diesel backup there, it won't qualify for a core, but there are other incentives that you still can qualify for. And you could do this. But again, if you're the operations manager of that facility and you're leaving those TRUs burning on diesel for days at a time, you're pouring money down a hole, right? As quickly as possible, get the electrical you need installed, and you'll start saving a lot of money very quickly. So I'd say, rather than try to build something that could be all electric in every possible situation, we said, let's get something that works in a very large percentage of the market, hub and spoke, regular routes, et cetera, but also provide the option to plug into units that can operate on diesel backup for the customers who need that assurance or who perhaps have infrastructure issues in certain areas. So, that's really how we chose to solve it now. And as we work with customers, we'll design products that, will fit the specific situations they're confronting.
I would only add that we find those exact sort of extreme duty case challenges within the on-road and off-road segments as well. And, in the view of CalSTART and the California Air Resources Board, because we have such a close deadline to meet, we have to find the applications where this technology works, and we have to start deploying there, and we have to be flexible and creative and know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's going to take more than one type of equipment for us to achieve our objectives. And so I just think that that's an important reminder for us all, and hat to put on when we're planning for not only our trailer electrification, but truck and fleet electrification as well. So I don't see any more questions coming in. And we're about time for the amount of time we had for questions anyways. Was there any last comment, a question that you felt you hadn't completed a thought on, or something that any one of you wanted to address before I close this out for the day?
Nikki, I would just like to thank you. I'd like to thank the audience that's taken the time to listen to what CALSTART and eNow and Excel can offer. We're here to help them meet the upcoming requirements that states like California and other are going to implement. And first and foremost is our technology can save them money. So thanks again for the great job that CALSTART's doing. And again, thank you, all of the people who are listening in.
Great. Thank you so much. So I just got a couple more housekeeping things for the end of this call. First of all, thank you to all of my panelists. Thank you, Suresh. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing this information with us. As we mentioned at the beginning, these slides with these really important TCO calculators on them are all going to be in your inbox in the morning. So if you are not able to watch this whole thing today, the recordings will be available. You can always revisit it. And if you have follow-on questions, right, feel free to reach out to CALSTART. We'll put you in touch with any one of these panelists. And they're all available for follow-up questions. The last sort of comment that I just wanted to make is I know that we're talking about TCOs and making a business case for these units. But you know, me personally, as a person who lives very close to a lot of freight facilities, there are benefits that are not on the bottom line. There are benefits to our community members, to employees. There's noise reduction and truly life-saving benefits for all of this technology. So I'm very encouraged by how many attendees we had today who are looking seriously at pursuing this transition. It is going to benefit neighborhoods like mine immensely. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You get about 3 minutes back to your day to hopefully stretch before your next Zoom meeting. And again, you'll get all of this information in your inbox, and feel free to reach out with any follow-on questions. Thank you so much.